Let's Get Two presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros.
For the second time in 6 years, the Astros are baseball's best.
And now, Go Let's Get Two presents, dedicated to the two-time world champs from H-Town, brought to you by three guys who've been here since Art Howe had hair.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Astros fans of all ages, welcome to the January 30th, the last Go Astros of January. I'm Andy Tomchesson. I'm hosting today. Alongside me is James Christopher. We are missing Brian Arbor today, who is battling the force or battling the dark side. He hasn't.
I'm offended by this whole thing because he went to Disney World because he thinks it's the happiest place on earth. What's happier than hanging out with us? I mean, that's
the lightsaber experience, evidently, because he hasn't committed, and I don't know. But if I'm guessing, analytics guys are always going to be on the dark side because it's more practical.
it really is.
Scouts are Jedis.
Yeah, that's right.
And analytics guys are Sith.
I think
that's
you started
fair.
something.
And I think that's okay because there's room for both in baseball
for both
today.
Yeah.
But speaking of analytics and scouts, the Astros have a new GM, which is, I think, going to be the bulk of what we talk about today. Welcome Dana Brown to the Astros family. In kind of a weird move for the first time in a really, really long time, James Click notwithstanding, the Astros went completely outside their comfort zone and hired a GM who has no connection to the Astros at all, which is kind of weird. Even when they hired Dusty Baker, he went on and on about how much time he had spent in Houston nightclubs, how much Hank Aaron had taken him to different places in Houston to drink or dance or watch music being played. So there, and he spent a lot of time as a Dodger in Houston nightclubs or dance halls or whatever. So it's always been a thing where the Astros have tried to hire people they were familiar with. And
even James Click, coming from that Rays organization, something they were very familiar with.
Yeah, and so this is a brand new thing. Dana Brown is I guess the connection is he played baseball 35 years ago with Craig Biggio at Seton Hall.
Which feels on brand for some of the complaints about the GM search.
And we'll talk about that in just a bit, but he comes from most recently from the Braves, where he was vice president of scouting. He is being credited with draft picks that include Michael Harris and Spencer Strider. Is instrumental or has been named as being instrumental in identifying and getting some of these guys to sign long-term team-friendly contracts. I'm not really sure how that works from a director of scouting perspective or a vice president of scouting perspective. But evidently the Braves are also saying that's something he was, partly responsible for. So I think those are good things. What's your take on Dana Brown as the new GM?
I actually like it. And one, as director of scouting, having watched the movie Trouble with the Curve, which is all you need to do to learn if you want to learn all about scouting in Major League Baseball, they do form a relationship with them, and maybe that's enough to get someone to sign a long-term deal. I actually like it. And I like that it's a pivot to scouting. And, there's been this discussion about the role analytics plays in baseball. And you and I mean, for the record, are very much on board of analytics being one of the primary tools to win, right? I think people have tried to shout us as not one of those things, but that's, I think, the case. But I like the fact that you always have to keep adapting, and maybe kind of adapting more to a traditional scouting plan or point of view might be the thing to sort of level out the fact that everybody has analytics and is good at it. I like it. I liked it from a winning organization. I like it from an organization that seems to rely on homegrown talent like ours. And I know we're going to get to this, but what I don't like about the whole situation is the goalpost pushing about the conversation.
Well, it's interesting because as you mentioned it, I think one of the franchises that was at the forefront a little bit before the Astros actually were the Oakland A's. And you talk about the Oakland A's being making that switch almost purely to analytics and being analytics driven in every one of the decisions they made from a personnel standpoint, including who they drafted, why they drafted them, where they drafted them, how much money they were going to spend, what guys they were going to acquire, what free agents they were going to acquire. Certainly weren't going to spend a lot of money on anybody. Never won a World Series. And even if you go back to 2017, AJ Hinch was given a lot of credit for knowing when to ignore what the numbers said and go with his guts. Dusty Baker evolved more, I think, than either of us expected him to. Yeah. And still don't trust him with a bullpen, although he did really, really well this year. But paid more attention to the analytics than I think either of us expected him to. So I think there's got to be a blend, and I think that's where the Astros are headed. And I think that's what Dana Brown has done throughout his career is kind of marry those two things. So even though he's coming from the scouting world, primarily from a job title perspective, the organization that he's come from is very heavily involved with the analytics revolution. Maybe just not as well known as the Dodgers or the Astros, or some of the other clubs that are at the forefront of that. But the Braves certainly seem, as witnessed by the fact that they won a World Series as recently as a year ago, which we don't talk about. But that's one of the. I think that's one of the pieces that's some of the grumbling that we've heard throughout this process is the Astros are switching to this weird caveman-esque. We're only going to do things that Jeff Bagwell says we're going to do from now on, as witnessed by something Bob Nightingale stuck out after he broke the news that Dana Brown had been hired.
What was the Nightingale quote? Do you have it in front of you?
Well, that Nightingale quote, the second tweet after he broke the news about Dana Brown was Brad Ausmus was second place.
Yeah. Well, second place is no place you're off the team. I take the Cobra Kai approach to that when it comes to Astros GMs. The thing is I feel like as a fan base, it chalks up to like the psychology of not being able to have nice things. And it felt like to me, there was this reason to want to clutch pearls. It would have been absolutely moronic for anybody to say, I'm joining this franchise that has won now 2 World Series in 5 years based on this thing and say, you know what? I somehow can do it better. I don't think you can do better than winning a championship. And therefore I'm going to throw all of it out. I don't think that was ever really on the table. And it honestly, Andy, got really exhausting to listen to the debate. The number of people that I actually muted on Twitter is long and distinguished, but it seemed like the complaint was always they're not going to hire anybody from analytics. And then they did, and they're not going to let them do anything. Like it's this goalpost pushing of the reality is when nothing that they've actually been afraid of had manifested itself at least yet.
Well, I think it's really unfair to Dana Brown because it's limiting. Because if he does well, it's going to be in spite of, or the fact he had to overcome the meddling of Jeff Bagwell, Enos Cabell, Reggie Jackson, Jim Crane, probably Craig Biggio. Who else is around? The ghost of J.R. Richard, Mike Scott from San Diego. Just any player that happens to get interviewed is going to be given credit. And if he does poorly, it's because Jim Crane has meddled too much. There is no situation in this world of complaining about the pre-hire that Dana Brown can succeed, short of winning a World Series in his first year, because anything he does is going to be wrong. It's interesting to me that he's coming in with a reputation of having some level of control or some level of say and expertise in getting players into finesse, I guess, into getting players to sign long-term contracts that are team friendly at a time when the team needs to do that. When you have Framber Valdez, Kyle Tucker, and Kristen Javier who need that attention pretty quickly, frankly, to keep the Astros window open a little bit longer than the 2 years we all think it's open kind of immediately. But I think he's going to be given the freedom to that. I don't see any other than just irrational fear, which kind of permeated the fan base from the day that everybody realized James Click wasn't coming back. Beyond that fear, I don't see any reason why Dana Brown's not going to be given that chance.
Yeah, I don't. There's no evidence to the contrary there's no evidence that he will. And I'll take the same position I've taken the whole time. If we see that that's happening, I'll be one of the first people up there yelling at him. I just don't see the reason to get panties in a twist over a thing we don't know if it's going to happen yet. And I also think one of the smart things about this hire is at some point they're going to have to replenish the farm system. At some point they're going to have to start making moves against in the draft again. And again, who better than somebody like Dana Brown?
Well, I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that always bugs me is that when you talk to the people who still are convinced that the Astros were not punished for 2017, the big punishment beyond, I don't care about Jim Crane's $5 million. That doesn't bother me. And, yes, it was the most they could penalize him, but Jim Crane doesn't sweat losing $5 million. That is, frankly, hiring Jake Odorizzi and him not doing well. Okay. That is a half season of Odorizzi. Okay. But you took four high draft picks from us, from an organization that is not going to be at the top of the market in payroll ever. And so when you do that, you've got a hole, and you're seeing that. You've seen it for the last couple of years. The Astros have been very fortunate to have guys come up and outperform what Baseball Prospectus and the other ranking entities seem to think we have in our farm system, in Christian Javier, in Framber Valdez, in Jeremy Pena. But those guys are the exception rather than the rule, because we have a lot of organizational players in AA and AAA right now who are not expected to make any kind of impact on the major league roster anytime soon. And right now we don't have those holes, but we are going to need to backfill players at some point. We are going to have a hole in center field. We are going to have a hole at catcher. We are potentially going to have a hole at first base because Abreu is on a 3-year contract, but he is an aging player. And so you don't know that Altuve is not going to get hurt. You don't know that Bregman's not going to get hurt. You don't know somebody's not going to fall off the face of the earth. And so you've got to be able to have people in your org to replace those guys. And when you have that gap of 2 years of not having your top draft picks, that hurts. So a guy like Dana Brown comes in to identify talent, none of which are going to be as attractive as that.
Yeah.
We just saw. And those of you who are just listening to us, you just missed the sexiest thing you're going to see on this in this show ever.
I like how Quint behaves like a large cat. I mean, it's just like German Shepherds aren't supposed to do that, but hello, here we are. To your point, not only has every player that the Astros valued, but the national media didn't. Like, I think the Astros always believed in Javier, and I think they've always believed in Pena. Clearly, they always believed in Pena and Framber. I don't think even players they didn't necessarily know what they had in Chas McCormick basically outkicked their coverage. To your point, you can't count on that happening every single time because it's way out of the norm, incredibly out of the norm. We talk about it all the time where a baseball draft pick can be a crapshoot because who just knows if they'll ever even get out of AA. Like, you cannot count on the Astros being as lucky and as good, but as lucky as they've been when it comes to players kind of outperforming their expectations.
Well, and for every Chas McCormick, you've got a Jake Myers. And I'm not picking on Jake Myers, but he was healthy. He was here for half a season doing well, and he's been unhealthy since then. And so counting on him to be a factor isn't a good bet right now. That's just the nature of the beast, and you've got to have players that are ready to come up. And I don't know that Pedro Leon is that guy, but you need somebody like Dana Brown who's going to be able to identify talent in the draft from an international signing standpoint, get those guys signed and get them accelerated up to the majors as soon as possible. And so that's what I think Dana Brown brings to the table. I do want to address the Brad Ausmus thing for just a bit.
Okay, sure.
I know we want to talk about the other GM that the Astros apparently hired in the offseason, Robert Bagwell, but I will not stick my neck out very often unless I 100% know things. Let me tell you how the Brad Ausmus thing came about. Brad Ausmus has been talked to about a front office job. There is a reporter in the Houston market who got wind of this and knew that the Astros were looking at GM candidates and put those two things together
Sure.
and made them into one fact. I can tell you that Brad Ausmus, regardless of what Bob Nightingale has run with, was never a candidate for GM. So you can believe what you want to believe, and Brad Ausmus may very well be a front office employee of the Astros in the very near future, but he was never going to be GM. Saying he was second place is the same as saying I was second place. You
Well,
could
and I
take
should
it out of the phone book and he was second place. It's not a reality, but the fear that it caused in our fan base is just kind of bizarre to me. Because ultimately, if that's affecting your happiness as an Astros fan, it's really, really, really weird.
Well, it is weird. And first of all, the show does have connections to the Astros. We don't run around and pretending like we are more than we are, but we do at least, well, I say you do at least get wind of things that is reliable from sources.
I would bet any amount of money on this particular factoid. And
yeah. And we're not going to be one of those shows that's chasing clout. We have a thing to do here. And I will say this, I do want to get to Jeffrey Robert Bagwell, but it does seem like, obviously you and I have friends on Twitter that have other fan bases. Doesn't it feel like Emily Nyman had a better offseason than we did? Like we celebrated a World Series, but we completely made ourselves miserable over this.
Well, up until, I will say this, Emily probably had a better offseason after they signed Judge and Rodon, because before they signed Judge, they were all about commit Harry Carey.
That's true. That's true. I mean, and I would have been too. Like, I was trying to mentor some of them through that.
When Judge signed with the Giants for a day.
Yeah.
Wasn't that also Nightingale?
I think it was. It wasn't even a day. Wasn't it like 5 hours or something?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get into reliability, I don't know if Nightingale's your guy.
I just think it's so funny, though, for fan bases to, like, worrying about Aaron Judge is a legit worry.
Sure.
But worrying about what we've worried about is dumb. And it's, I don't know, it's just, I think you and I come from a different walk of life where maybe there's other bigger fish to fry in life. So we don't have time to worry about things unless they actually need to be worried about.
Or when there's something to worry about. I mean, there is this whole idea of wait and see, because I'm sure if the internet existed, our fan base would have lost their mind when Larry Dierker was named manager of the Astros. Let's pull him down from the booth. And all he did was go out and win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 division championships, 4 division championships. I'm sure I'm counting that wrong. But by all measures, a successful manager with no experience. It is possible for those things to work out. But all the worrying in the world didn't make a difference on the front end of that transaction.
Yeah. No, you're right. But let's talk Baggy.
Oh, Mr. Bagwell. I think there's something to be said, and I know I would like to have this conversation with Brian next time he's on the show, but I think there's this belief that somehow Bagwell woke up sometime around the end of the World Series and started telling Jim Crane how to run his team. There is a weird disconnect between the fan base, I guess the fan base that is newer, that doesn't appreciate the Astros of the mid to late 90s and into the mid 2000s. Jeff Bagwell.
You mean the Astros that produced our only 2 Hall of Famers so far?
Right. Yeah, Jeff Bagwell is on the short list of greatest players in franchise history. Does that give him special insight into running a baseball team? Absolutely not. But does it give more insight to anybody on Twitter? Yeah, pretty much 100%. So does he have opinions? Yes. Does he talk to the owner? Yes. Is that a new thing? No, it's not. And it's okay. What Jim Crane chooses to do with that or not, that's his business, because guess what? He owns the team. There has not been a position where Jeff Bagwell has done anything wrong or bad or damaging to the franchise, other than the fact that if you stick a microphone in front of his face, he will say some weird things because he's not really all that media savvy. And I don't think he generally cares that much about what the media thinks about what he says. And so that can be problematic sometimes. But he's not the GM. He doesn't pretend to be the GM. And I don't think he's going to be somebody who's telling Dana Brown what to do, nor do I think Dana Brown has a reputation for being the kind of guy who's going to be pushed around by Jeff Bagwell or Enos Cabell or Reggie Jackson or the ghost, whoever.
It just, there's two things to unpack there. One, I think, with Bagwell having a position in the Astros and Biggio having a position in the Astros and Reggie Jackson, I think they think it's the same thing as Vince Young being like an associate athletic director. That is a nothing job. Yes. Jim Crane is this. I don't think it's a nothing job. I think he's always had the ear of some players, and maybe it's because he wants to be around players, or maybe because he values the input. I don't know. I don't necessarily care. There's 2 World Series that we're celebrating. I also think that it's not that dumb if you think to yourself, okay, we're going to sign 2 players. Jeff, you know them both. Who do you think's a better fit in the clubhouse, this guy or that guy? Because I think we completely underestimate how living in a clubhouse for 6 months can actually, and having it be a bad experience, can actually be bad for a baseball team. And how many times in baseball history have there been a World Series champion where it was a toxic clubhouse? There've been a few, but for the most part, they talk about how the clubhouse was together and we were like, it was circle the wagons time. And I think that if you're looking for personalities to add, you can't just go off of the numbers. You need to talk about how that would mesh with other athletes in that clubhouse.
I mean, even in the very regrettable baseball documentary, Major League 2, Jack Hartman on paper should have been a great addition to the Cleveland Indians. Instead, clubhouse cancer, got traded away mid-season. What happened to that team? Went to the World Series after they traded him.
Rube Baker took it, and he was in the gall darn major leagues, exactly. Boys.
But chemistry plus.
Yeah, totally. Plus chemistry guy. And I think the problem with this debate, and it's the problem with every debate right now. You either are on a side or you're not on a side, and there's zero nuance in the middle. Again, I think you and I would freak out if Jeff Bagwell was named the GM and all the analytics guys were fired and it was just a bunch of meatheads running the front office. That's not the case. It was never going to be the case.
Well, it's just kind of gross. I don't love Jim Crane. I don't think he is some sort of baseball savant by any means, but I also don't think he's an idiot. And we seem to this is in all things, politics, business, whatever. We tend to take the people we hate or the people we dislike and assign stupidity to them pretty as a blanket thing. So I've seen more than once on Twitter where Jim Crane's a moron and just needs to step out of the way. Jim Crane didn't build his distribution business, whether he has ties to the mafia or not, I'm not going to say. But you don't build these things by being stupid. Tony Soprano wasn't a stupid guy. He may have done stupid things, but he wasn't a stupid guy. Jim Crane's not a stupid guy. Does he understand every bit of analytics that Jeff Lunau was trying to push towards the team? Maybe not, but he understood enough to get out of the way of Jeff Lunau. He understood enough to get in the way for some of the things that James Click was doing. It's part of owning a business and it's part of leadership. And sometimes some people get more leeway than others because they earn it.
The false comparison you're hearing right now is that Jim Crane is Jerry Jones. And look, they have one thing in common, or maybe 2 things in common. They both enjoy money and they both enjoy winning. The difference between the two is the Cowboys do not have to win to be profitable. I mean, they're still the most valuable franchise in the United States because, and trust me, it's not been a lot of good times. I think Jim Crane's smart enough to know this Astros money train stops rolling when the winning stops. And I don't think he's going to let that happen.
Well, I mean, he definitely has figured out that it's a whole lot better for his bottom line when they are winning. Because he did own the team when they were losing 100 games a season.
Right.
And it was really hard to pay more than about $20 for a ticket really close to the field at that point. So, it's a different world now where you can't get in the park for $20.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Again, I think it was much ado about nothing. I know you want to talk Hall of Fame, but real quick, looks like Yuli could be coming back to the Astros. My heart says, yay. My head says he can't play any other positions but first, and we're stupid for thinking he can. Maybe second, I guess, in a non-shift second base. I don't know.
So what season was it where everybody was hurt? Was it 2018?
Yeah, I think so. He played like
that was like 4 years ago, and he tried to play second a little bit, and we were all really, really mad about it.
Yeah.
It was him playing second and Tyler White playing first. Anybody else remember that?
I do.
Nobody
Yeah.
loved that. And I guess a lot of us have blocked it out of our minds, but Yuli was not great at second base. And the only reason he was playing second base is because Tyler White had gained so much weight that he couldn't cover second base. There is this belief that he could spell Bregman at third, an inning here or there, that he could spell Abreu at first. And I guess that, a corner utility guy is a thing. My idea of a utility guy is more of a Dubon who could cover all the infield positions. But, I guess if they're going to force you to carry 13 guys, that's great.
Yeah.
It does break my jersey streak, which makes me think I can buy more things. So I'm happy about that. And frankly, the Minute Maid Park fan shop, the Shed, they don't call it the Shed anymore. They should.
They shoshould.
We're
fancy now
because I'll be in there with my credit card going, "Ooh, what can I buy?"
Yeah.
But speaking of the Shed and the upcoming Hall of Fame weekend that'll be mid-season at some point, we talked really briefly on the outro last week, but the Astros have named 2 Hall of Fame members to their Hall of Fame. And then we had some talk about 2 other Astros who did not make the Baseball Hall of Fame this past week. First of all, congratulations to Bill Doran, who was a second baseman for the Astros through the early to late 80s before he was traded to the Cincinnati Reds. For a lot of us of a certain age, he was probably the first Astros hero or one of the first Astros heroes. Bridged the gap. The Astros have been blessed, and Houston franchises always had great big guys. If you're a basketball fan, Elijah Wan, Moses Malone, some other guys that we'll talk about. The Astros have always had good second basemen. Going back to Joe Morgan, Billy Doran kind of bridged the way to Craig Biggio. Craig Biggio kind of bridged the way to Altuve. Yes, there was a guy with anal fissures in between there, but we don't talk about him. Jeff Kent played there for a little bit. He had no anal fissures that we know about. He did fall off a monster truck. That wasn't while he was with us. But Bill Doran was one of those guys, and he was just a clean cuts, clutch player. I don't think he ever hit for great power, great average, but he was one of those guys that was constantly dirty, constantly hustling.
When you play in the Astrodome, that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a patch of dirt that's only like this big.
Yeah.
But he managed to find it. It's usually like in the first or second inning somehow. Maybe he rolled around in pregame. The other Hall of Fame nominee or finalist or winner, I guess you would say, is the announcer Bill Brown, who I've been confusing with Greg Lucas for about 2 weeks now. So I apologize to Bill Brown. But Bill Brown was an announcer with the Astros for I think 25, 26 years, maybe a little bit longer than that.
Mostly TV.
I think dates back to the HSE network days, but has done radio, television, back to radio, back to television.
Became a world-class photographer in his retirement years.
Yeah. So congratulations to both of them. What memories do you have of Bill Doran on the field?
Well, as we talked about, first of all, I'm wearing the old all orange cap in honor of Bill Doran making the Hall of Fame, the Astros Hall of Fame. Look, we talked before about a lot of my memories are a lot less specific than you guys because of the age. And I will tell you the funniest thing I have for him is I had a baseball card and he had a prominent Adam's apple in it, and I didn't know what was wrong with his neck. And that's how I learned what an Adam's apple was Bill Doran.
Yes, because as a half Polish, half Irish person, you probably didn't have an Adam's apple.
None of those. No, a lot of net fact in those two people. So I remember him being clutch. I remember him being part of this amorphous group of guys that I don't know. Some people loved him, some people didn't. I think it's what happens when, look, to be fair, and I know we're gonna get to Bill Brown, but if we're the Yankees, he doesn't make the Hall of Fame. Like if he's, you know what I mean? Like I think that but I'm happy for him, and I think he was as surprised as anybody else, and I'm happy for him.
No, he was one of those glue guys for the Astros in the 80s, and I think I have two specific memories. I think the first one was that I had convinced my brother, Marty, that I had powers of prognostication because and it probably is the one time it ever happened in his life, but I called a home run in the ninth inning, and Doran hit it and walked off the game. And it might have been even in the 10th inning, but it's like we were watching the game. It's like, he's going to hit a home run. I walked out of the room. He hit the home run. And I got about 2 months out of,
yes, right. Yeah.
What does Andy know? Because at that point, Marty still didn't realize I was full of shit. But that 2 months was golden.
Yeah.
The second thing was that he was one of the first people that made me realize that women paid attention to baseball for things other than baseball, because evidently he was a man who could fill out a pair of baseball pants in a way that was pleasing to the female gender.
I've learned between Cedric and Jessica, women and gay men like baseball just like we do, just differently. But, and I get it.
Which brings us back to Brad Osmus, which is another one that I've heard these things about.
The sexiest Astro alive, right? Wasn't that the thing? The thing about Bill Brown, as we kind of move to that, is
to the sexiest man in baseball,
right? Because Bill was on the same time Milo was, right? And Milo was this sort of electric figure, and Bill Brown wasn't. He was in that tradition of steady hand, and he was let the game, the play speak for itself, and sort of okay for me. And then I heard him with Sparky a couple of years ago covering for Robert, and I was like, man, I missed that voice in a way that I didn't know that I would miss it until I heard it again. And so I'm really happy for him because he's been around the club since he retired, again, becoming a photographer and things like that. So very, very excited for him to get in here because I know he loves this organization.
Yeah, it does kind of beg the question, though, what are going to be the limits? Because the Astros are clearly making this Hall of Fame nomination or weekend an annual thing. And at some point, are we Charlie Kerfelding this thing? I mean,
well, it does make you wonder. Like
Buddy Bell played for us for a year and a half. Is he I mean, what are we doing?
First of all, I'd be all about Charlie Kerfeld coming back, but it does make you wonder. They put 11 guys in the first one.
Right.
Maybe you could have parsed those out.
Could have dripped that out a little bit more.
A little bit, because you're going to have this gap before the current guys are ready to start going in. Although, are there criteria for this? I mean, can you put Altuve in now? I don't even know what the criteria are.
Well, speaking of a organization that has criteria, probably the last thing we're going to talk about, Billy Wagner did not make the Baseball Hall of Fame, but he did get 61.8% of the vote, which was the largest amount he's got.
And up exponentially.
Large leap. He's got 2 more years to reach the threshold of 75%. He's on a very good trajectory now, and so a lot of people are thinking he's going to make it before his initial eligibility is up. The other former Astros player, Carlos Beltran, did not make it, and was interesting to me from a standpoint that he is going to be the first person that has to go through the scrutiny of being involved with 2017 and how the baseball writers are going to treat that.
They're already giving him a pass.
Yeah, I don't think Beltran is a first ballot Hall of Famer anyway, and I think he finished like at 50 some odd percent.
Okay.
Number in front of me. But didn't do bad. But I'm wondering, there were a few articles about why I voted for him or why I won't vote for him, as there were with steroid users. So it's kind of interesting. But I think it'll be a good test for him to get through, because I'd really like all this nonsense to go away by the time Altuve is ready and able to be elected, because that's probably the candidate that we have that's going to be most.
Yeah.
If you got to pick somebody from that team.
Truly, yeah. I mean, obviously like Verlander, but that's different.
I don't think Verlander's going to have an issue. I think he's in. I don't think Bregman, unless he really gets back to 2019 kind of production, is a candidate.
Especially at third base, right? It's a competitive position to get in.
Right. But Altuve's, I think he's a guy, and I really, especially knowing what his involvement was, as more things have come out about how little he was involved and how much he really didn't want even that amount of involvement, really would like him to be not as stained as a lot of Yankees and Dodgers fans seem to keep wanting him to be. So it'll be a good test to see how long it takes Beltran to get through and all that kind of fun stuff.
The Wagner case goes back to something you talk about all the time. If Wagner played in any other uniform, he'd be in already. He's
especially on a coast. If he was a Red
yeah,
Sox or a Dodger or a Yankee or a Met, he'd be in.
because pretty much Rivera is the only one with truly better numbers than Wagner. That's
Yes.
as a closer in the Hall of Fame. And I mean, I do think he'll get in. I think you follow it closer than I do, but it does seem like he's well on a. He'll probably get in on next year, and I think that will be great for him and great for the city of Houston.
Well, it's an interesting question too, because I think this is the second year in a row. I believe Scott Rowland is the only guy who got in this year, so he'll be a class of one. This is the second year in a row, I believe, that we've had a class of one. Um, at some point, the Hall of Fame, they have every right to be as picky as they want to be.
Sure.
The baseball writers of America are capricious and arbitrary, and at some point, they gatekeep for really just strange reasons. If you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So this idea that, well, you're a first ballot, I'll vote for you now, but I won't vote, or I won't vote for you your first 5 years, but I will vote for you after that. Well, what changed?
No, I agree. And again, we've talked to our friend Emily about this on Twitter a bunch about just how random it is and how dumb it is. And it does seem like there should be a minimum of 3 inductees every year. Give us reason to celebrate. There's plenty of room in Cooperstown and plenty of candidates that, quite frankly, it's not the NBA. There's plenty of candidates that would meet.
Well, and the
those
rules were
criteria.
established when you had 16 teams in baseball. There are now 30. There's going
Yeah.
to be 32 if you believe what the commissioner's office says at some point. So there are more candidates, more players, more worthy players. At some point, they have to stop acting like this is some sort of ticket to heaven and more of a recognition. I mean, seriously, we're not keeping out, bad neighbors from a neighborhood. It's not St. Peter selecting. Oh no, not you. You want stole gum from this cactus stop. those dino eggs. No, 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 no. You can't
Yeah.
steal those. So no, I'm excited for Wagner. I hope he's excited too. Really interesting that his son is pitching for the Astros in the minor leagues. So that's a nice little connection there. But good news for him. Good news for Beltran that it looks like he'll be on a track to get in, and good news for Billy D and Bill Brown.
That's right. I guess is that it?
That's it.
Can I do my Go Astros now? Yeah, my parting shot. Yeah. So Brian is out, and he makes the second member of this team in the last 3 weeks or so to go to Disney World, Disneyland. Dear Disneyland, can you quit making it the first order and have it be the Empire? Look, I understand the movies were new, but now everything else that's being made takes place before Return of the Jedi, just about. So let's get some Empire going. Let's get some real stormtroopers and maybe a little more Vader and a little less Kylo Ren. Go Astros.
If I ever go back to a Disney-owned property, it'll be all Marvel and no Star Wars. Go Astros.